Hello and welcome to Geeky Guys. If you're into geeky things, we're the guys for you. Hi there guys, how's it going for today? And in today's video, I'm having a bit of a discussion about my own signature style, which I've tried to put my sort of thumb on or my finger on exactly what it sort of is. But it's sort of hard to define exactly to a degree what my sort of signature style is. And I think everyone sort of has a signature style of playing when they're playing in Commander and whatnot. Um, I think my signature style is a mix of kind of aggro and kind of mid-range, I guess. That's kind of my style. I'm not really that much like an aggro player, I guess, would be the best term to use because though what I tend to do is on the creature sort of focus side, I don't tend to really like very sort of fast, aggressive decks. I don't really worry that much about like just having, all my creatures being, 1/1s with haste or, very small creatures that have evasion and whatnot, things like that. So not very much like Edric sort of style decks like that are just like, this is built to, get very low, have a very low, set of costs, get in there, punch people in the face, within the first few turns of the game. Though I do try to have some stuff for the early game, I more have stuff for the much later game. And that's where I tend to sort of say that my style is somewhere between like aggro to mid-range. It's not really a defined style exactly or a defined term per se, I would say, because I'm not like a control deck as well, or why I don't have that style. I play decks that rely on creatures getting in for combat damage for the most part. I still play some decks that have a different theme or a different sort of strategy around them. Sometimes, like my Carador deck, that is still a creature combat damage focused deck, but the idea of that deck is to get a bunch of creatures into my graveyard and then reanimate them and then attack people with them that way. So that way you have another different form of card advantage, or you do have a different style of play and whatnot and things like that. I like lots of different sort of strategies. I like artifacts, as long as it's sort of creature-based artifacts and whatnot. I find myself being very lost when it comes to combos and whatnot. I know how some combos work or a lot of combos work, but the thing is, I'm very bad at actually piloting them, and I just don't know what I'm doing for the most part, and I get lost very easily. So that's where I sort of consider my style. My style is, okay, I'm going to play my ramp spells early on, not do very much, for the first few turns maybe, set up my stuff, get my, engines going or whatnot, slowly but surely get my card draw set up, stuff like that. Then start playing, the things that are going to start generating me, creatures and bodies and whatnot, either that being, something that's on my commander, like if I'm going with a tokens build, or if I'm going with a +1/+1 counters build, or if I'm going, I don't know, with some other sort of build, I don't know, but whatever. For the most part, that's my style, and my style is, I guess it's simple, but it's also, it's not just the most simple thing to do, I guess, but it is fairly simple. But the thing is, you've got to always worry about different things with that kind of deck, which is solely reliant mostly on, you know, casting your things, having them resolve, attacking people for damage, you know, and then having a huge commitment on your board. And then, you know, again, my style is a little bit more graveyard oriented or reanimation oriented a little bit in a lot of ways, because I just believe that recursion is a lot simpler and a lot easier to sort of utilize, more so than you know, things like protection and whatnot. I just find that protection sort of doesn't do very much for the most part. Like the times that you'll have it, a lot of the time, especially like the instant speed stuff, is just like, oh cool, my board just got wiped. Now I draw the spell that would have saved my board. Okay, so now it does nothing. So I do find that always seems to be the way. It always seems to be that awkward moment. It's really cool when you have it in hand and it's like, oh cool, I'll prevent that board fight from hitting my stuff. That's like the dream scenario, but it doesn't happen that often, to be honest, especially when you only have one or maybe two of those, you know, wrath style protections. And the thing is, now, you know, wraths have become a lot more exile based to get around indestructible and whatnot. So you just find a lot more people running that sort of removal. So you don't often save your stuff even from a lot of board wipes anymore. You even lose your creatures. You don't even get to recur them sometimes, unless you've got sack engines and whatnot, things like that. But there are still certainly destroy-based wraths. I'm not saying that all the wraths in the world that people play nowadays are exile-based, but a lot more exile-based board wipes and removal are used nowadays than what, you know, was previous done so. And even I run more exile-based, or I try to run more exile-based removal, or as much as possible. I do find that Orzhov seems to be the best colours, or at least white seems to be one of the best colours for exile-based removal. So that's often a colour that sort of, you know, has found its way in a few of my decks, which is why I wanted to build an Abzan deck, because I really like big stompy green creatures and whatnot, and I really like ramping out my big stompy green creatures and whatnot, but I also like having that good removal for the creatures and for the artifacts and the enchantments that my opponents are going to play, that are going to combo off, or that are going to, you know, try to win them the game or whatnot. You know, and that's what I think, you know, this era of Magic is becoming. It's becoming much more, you know, I have an infinite this, I have, you know, this combo, I have this la I have, you know, this super duper aggro plan, you know, I have this infinite mill plan, I have, you know, 6 or 7 other things that will, you know, win me the game. I have 6 or 7 tutors, I have this, I have that, la-di-da, I have, you know, all this ramp, I have all this card draw. I'm going to find, you know, what I'm trying to do. And my deck, I guess, you know, a lot of my decks sort of weren't competing for a long time there in that space. And I've really had to dig down and sort of start going, you know, how am I actually going to get, you know, a win in here or there sometimes and whatnot, because, you know, if you're just going to go up against all these decks, even when you're playing more casually, you know, in our play group that we play, or that I play in, and I play in a few different people, but I usually play with 2 or 3 people at the same sort of play group for the most part. You know, 1 or 2 other people are playing very janky decks, but there's 1 or 2 people that are sort of playing, you know, fairly high-powered decks, and I'm not talking about CEDH level decks. I'm just saying that these decks are, you know, still very powerful despite, whatever, them being a lower power level than, what you would find at a CDH table. They can still win very easily and very quickly in comparison to what my decks can sort of win in, and especially if you get some bad draws, or if somebody just threat assesses you or whatever, or what have you, things like this, or if somebody just disrupts what you're doing and whatnot for a few turns, and then you can just be like, oh well, now I'm, basically either dead or pretty much dead, because I haven't been able to get my game plan going, and I wouldn't have been able to kill anyone for several turns, without a really good hand or whatever. But, it always seems like the way that, you're on the bad end of the stick. But I've won a few, a certain, lead my share of the games and whatnot. But I have had to slowly change my idea of exactly how I can do that and what cards I need to sort of win, and how I can sort of play my deck, or how I can play the way I want to play. Because again, I want to play a game where everyone gets to play the game. My style is to, for the most part, sit back, see what happens, have a bit of fun, enjoy playing and whatnot, and enjoy everyone's company, and enjoy, the game that we all love and whatnot, enjoy the flavor, and enjoy the lore, and enjoy all the other stuff, and enjoy some of the strategy too, not too much of the strategy, but a bit of the strategy, and enjoy the politics. So sometimes they can get a bit much, but I do enjoy that aspect of it. I do enjoy it when somebody pulls out, a bit more janky, fun, sort of style deck that's a bit like, oh, okay, this is going to be a bit more fun, or this is going to be a bit more, casual, this is a group hug deck, or whatever, this is just going to be, us four, having a bit of fun. And like sometimes, as I said, I have my own squirrel deck, which is a very janky deck. And sometimes if I just, I don't really want to play the more competitive decks sort of that I have, which is most of the other decks, they're much more powerful in terms of what they're actually doing, but they're still not CDH or, nowhere near optimized decks. But they are more towards optimized, I would say. But certainly they're stronger decks. They're not free-con decks, or they're not jank decks, which is what my squirrel deck is. It will be equivalent to what a pre-con or, a more janky sort of style deck is, because it can have really bad draws. It can do absolutely nothing sometimes. Like, if I do not find things that make me some squirrels, or if my squirrels die, then I'm just, or the one or two things that make me squirrels, and I can't, get them and reuse them somehow or whatnot, my deck really does nothing. I can find 50 lands in a row or whatever, and just never find a creature sometimes, or whatever, not literally, but, that seems like what happens. I can just be sitting there going, ramp spell, into ramp spell, into ramp spell, into ramp spell, and people are like, are you going to stop ramping? And I'm like, well, I haven't got anything else to do. And they're like, what, really? And I'm like, yep, this is all I've got. In other games, you'll be like, ramp spell, oh, I'll play this squirrel card, and now I have some squirrels, or whatever, and then you can do other things with that, but, that doesn't really actually, come across that much where you actually find those things, really. You do find it, a fair bit, but, again, it's less likely to happen than what it seems like sometimes. You do get very unlucky, or you can get very unlucky in that deck, but that's half the fun of that deck, just in my opinion, and that's the way I like it to be for the most part. I don't want that deck to be ever too consistent, or, too powerful, or doing, too much or whatnot, or always like people are like, we can't play with the squirrel deck, or it just seems like it's too powerful for what it should be or whatever. It can do its own thing or whatnot sometimes, but again, it is very easy to stop. And again, a lot of my decks are easy to stop, but again, those decks have more chance to bounce back, essentially, for the most part, whereas the squirrel deck, it really does not have that capability that much. It has some capability, but it doesn't have that much capability. And, that's the way it is. I just decided this is my janky, more casual deck, and if anyone wants to play a more janky, fun game, sometimes when somebody brings out their group hug deck, I'll bring out my squirrel deck and just be like, me and the group hug deck are going to team up because, why not? I'll give the group hug deck some squirrels sometimes, and maybe they'll help me out or whatever, and they'll help me ramp and help me draw some cards. So that's actually helping me with the other players who might not be playing such, more casual decks or fun decks or whatever. But I do want to start discussing more and more things about Commander and whatnot, and I really like to talk about how to improve, just straightforward, straight ahead, basically fair decks, which is, you're not really running any combos, you're not really running many tutors, except for maybe land tutors or whatever. Things like that. Just like I wanted to start doing a series about, this sort of style stuff, and I thought the best way to sort of start talking about this sort of style of deck is to sort of just say, this is my signature sort of style of deck, this is the way that I play, and this is the way that I've found you can have success, and you need to really start changing your ideas on how to deck build a lot of the time, and I've had to change my ideas on how to deck build a lot of the time. I think a lot of people are stuck in the past a lot of the time with some cards and with some strategies and whatnot. And it's certainly not to say that some cards aren't good, but I think you need to remember that you need to sometimes cut good cards for better cards. And especially you need to have a really specific synergy for the most part. I have a token deck. Everything that's in there is focused on making as many tokens as I can, making my tokens as big as possible, and hitting people with my tokens. So that's what that deck does. Like I have, as I said, my graveyard deck with Carador, and that deck again is all about, putting things into my graveyard to recur later on, and a lot of the creatures that are in there are made so that, when they enter the battlefield or while they're on the battlefield, they will give my creatures the benefit and my opponents the disadvantage or what have you, or I'll be able to fly in, or I'll be able to trample in or whatever with my big beaters and whatnot, that, I can easily recur again and again and again and again, so that I can keep, hammering forward sort of thing. I have a Hydra's deck, or mostly a Hydra's deck, which is my Expel tribal deck, and that's the same idea. It's, I cast an Expel and I get a Hydra off of it, and if it's an Hydra Expel or what have you, or if it's just an Expel creature, then I get the Expel creature and a Hydra off of it. So, that's another way of like spending your mana and using your resources and whatnot. And sometimes you've got to really protect your commander in that deck, and you've really got to have, lots of copies of your commander in that deck. And like my Carador deck, for a lot of the time, you really have to have your commander as well. But with my tokens deck, the commander is, obsolete for the most part. Yeah, sure, it's good and it does stuff with the deck, but really it could be any commander, or it could be a partner pairing or anything. It could be anything. For the most part, the commander's, mostly irrelevant to what that deck's mostly doing, because the rest of the deck can sort of do its own game plan and it doesn't necessarily need the commander. Whereas my squirrel deck's sort of the same. It doesn't really care that much about the commander. Yeah, sure, the commander helps, but the commander isn't the be-all and end-all of the strategy. Yeah, sure, it really does help, again, but it's not like, I'm dead without it. Again, it's like the rest of the deck can find ways to win, and also cannot find ways to win sometimes. But it's not focused on being a Voltron deck or whatever, anything like that. It's never going to win via commander damage because it's only a 3/3 or whatever. But again, there's always different strategies. My strategy never really involves Voltron, and I know some people really like Voltron, but that's just not one of my strategies. I just find that Voltron sort of either is a bit boring or is a bit, unreliable. Because either you just kill everyone in the first, couple of turns and you're just like, oh cool, my threat is can't be dealt with, so I just win in a couple of turns. Or, oh cool, everyone dealt with my thing before, it was unable to be dealt with, now I'm probably not going to cast it again for another 6 or 7 turns or a couple turns or whatever it is. Unless you've got very heavy ramp or whatnot and things like that. And then it's like, oh well, cool, now we've gotten rid of your threat, now we better kill you before you get it back, or whatnot, or keep you in check to the point where we can kill you if we need to, and things like that. So just that style, I think I want more things in my deck that can potentially win me the game or help the rest of my team or the rest of my board and the rest of what the specific things that my deck is doing win the game. Like in my token deck, I've got the double tokens instant speed spell, second harvest or whatever it's called. So that can basically win me the game. If I've got a bunch of tokens out, before the end of Steve's turn or whatever, Lily's turn or whatever, before the player that's before me, look, I have maybe a couple of 4/4s. Oh yeah, cool, that's not that threatening. Oh cool, my board didn't go right. Now I have double that amount of power. Now I untap, and now I also, I basically overrun my creatures or overwhelming stampede my creatures or whatever, or I create a hoof, or well, I don't have create a hoof, but I use a create a hoof style effect like that, and just like I have now huge, creatures and a huge amount of creatures, and now I might not win this turn exactly, but I'll probably take out 1 or 2 players very easily, and the third player, will be severely crippled if not dead. And maybe all of them will be not dead but severely crippled. So then in the turn or two, I will win the game. So that's how you can sort of get in there and sort of just do these things. There are certainly some plays that sort of happen like at random that you sort of go, oh well, I've in my Expel deck I've gone into Genesis Hydra. And I can't remember what the X was, I can't remember. But in that X, where I revealed the top, I found Doubling Season. And, while the triggers basically were still on the stack, I had Doubling Season resolved. So my Hydra came in, well, the Genesis Hydra came in with double counters. And the Hydra that I made came in with double counters. And I also made another Hydra which also came in with double counters. So I made one more Hydra than what I was meant to make and doubled the counters that I was going to make. So that basically just set me up to next turn, attacking my opponents and just basically killing everyone. So that was just, an absurd, turn that just sort of came out. And, things like that can happen sometimes. But you never know what you're going to hit because it's not like I plan for these things or set these things up, or I know where things are in my deck or whatnot. For the most part, I know there's certain cards that are in my deck, but again, I don't tutor or I don't have, things that will set up my deck so that I can, consistently get that to happen. It might happen once in a blue moon or whatever, and it's a really funny moment when it does happen or whatnot, or not, but, to a degree, but, it is to a degree, but again, some people will be like, how consistently does that happen? And you're like, oh, well, that was the first time it's ever done that. Next game you'll play, you'll pull the same deck out and you'll be sitting there with, 5 or 6 mana or whatever, or maybe even 3 mana, and you still just can't cast your commander, or you've cast your commander and then somebody's killed it because they're too afraid of it, and then you don't hit land for a couple turns, or even if you do, it's still like, oh, cool, well, the rest of my deck doesn't really do anything without the commander, so it's really shut the deck down, and then, you're dead before you can really get back into it or, do very much relevance out there. So, it is like that sometimes where, your strategy actually does work and it's really cool and whatnot. But it's also sort of glass cannon-y. This whole strategy isn't like, again, it's not like the consistency of a combo. A combo, you know what it's going to do. If I face up against, let's say, Urza, or let's say Kin and Bond of Prodigy, or whatever the Boros dog's called, I can't remember its name, that reduces the ability costs by 2, I would expect that there's Basalt Monolith in that deck, because those decks can produce extra mana or reduce the cost. So I'm assuming that they've got an infinite mana combo of some sort in those decks, because that's, sort of a free roll, and even if they're not got that in there, a lot of the time they do, but even so, like, there are combos that I know that can go for my deck, or for a couple of my decks, but I don't run them, again, because that's not the way that I play. It's not my signature style, and it's just not the style that I like to play. I don't like to play stacks, or I don't like to play things that quote-unquote screw other people over. I don't like to bully people too much or anything like that. If somebody's ahead and somebody's going to win and whatnot, and if I can do something about it, then I will try to, but I've also got to protect myself, and I've also got to remember that there's 2 other players at the table, and can I really do anything? Yeah, I can attack them for 2 in the air, but they've got 7 blockers that can block in the air, and my attack really doesn't do anything because they've got, whatever, Ghostly Prison and things like this out. So, all I'm doing is paying 2 to tap my creature and maybe kill it, or, whatever. So that just isn't a good game plan. So, you've got to be smart with what you're doing to a degree. You've got to understand, paying 2 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment like Ghostly Prison is worth it to me sometimes or whatnot, because if I have to keep constantly paying 2 for every single creature to attack that person, I'm just going to run out of mana to attack that person, or I'm just going to run out of mana to cast my other things. So I really won't get anywhere, I won't get ahead in the game. So that's another reason why Rhystic Study and Smothering Tide and those sorts of things, people just don't often pay for them, because they've got other things to do. They've got other things to cast. They've got other things to worry about. They've got to get their game plan going rather than, worrying too much about it. But the best thing, obviously, again, to do with those, if you can do it, is to get rid of them. It's not the most threatening thing in the world. And I often talk about, destroy the most threatening thing in the world to you or to your game plan or whatnot. but that is a threatening thing to you and to your game plan if you're on a strategy like me, which is, creatures, combat, I hit you, which is a very, simple strategy, which again can be broken up by these things, and by board wipes, and by spot removal, and by, other things like that. Of course, there are things that can stop any deck and every deck, which there does need to be, but I do find that if you're not prepared, and again, there's just so much more out there now that is must remove sort of thing, or must counter, or must stop sort of stuff. The format has changed a lot, and you've really got to be able to keep up with that. What you expect from cards has got to become of a higher expectation, I would say, than what it ever has before, because again, if your things that you're casting aren't having a huge impact on the game, then, or they aren't progressing you to that win, or they aren't actually winning you the game, especially once you're over 6, 7, 8 mana or whatever, it's really just like, well, great, you just wasted your turn, really. Thanks for that. I cast Blightsteel at Colossus. Unless you're casting it for, a couple mana or cheating it out or whatever. Even then, sometimes it's not that great, whatever. But, again, unless it has haste and can kill someone, it's not that great. Even then, it just kills one person sometimes. And again, they might have blockers, things like that. There are things that will, get in the way of it just doing its thing and whatnot. But anyway, what I mean to say here is that, when you cast that card, that Blightsteel Colossus or what have you, okay, cool, it didn't kill me. Did it have haste? Okay, cool, it had, even if it had haste, it killed that other player. Okay, that helped me, because that other player would have been a big threat to me and would have taken me out potentially next turn. And that Blightsteel Colossus, yes, it could have taken me out right here, right now, but did I have an answer for it? Yes, I did. So if that Blightsteel Colossus had to come at me, or even, if I didn't have an answer, did I have some blockers? I would have blocked it, okay? I would have done that. I would have done whatever it took to survive, just barely, whatever it is, so that I can get to my turn and so that I can engage my plan. So once I get to my turn, whatever anyone else has done, if they haven't made an immediate effect on the game, or they haven't won before I can go, haha, I win, that's the point at which I am going to go, haha, I win, like I cast, again, End Raise Forerunners next turn. Okay, now I have trample and +2/+2 on all my creatures, and, I had Avenger of Zendikar out or whatever else, and I had 50 plants or whatever it was. So now I have, about 200 something power on the board suddenly, or whatever it is, that sort of thing. That's what you've got to expect from your cards. Your cards have got to, basically say, look, I'm setting up to win. This is what's going to happen. If this gets back to my turn or whatever, this is what's going to win me the game, and you've got to have that space to say, okay, I can actually stop somebody else from winning, and I can actually proceed to win after, this point. That's where you've got to be at. You've got to be like, this is going to win me the game because I have the other card in my hand, or I know that I can play the other card, or I can get the other card if I draw luckily, or whatever, things like that. So, or I have enough redundancy again to say, okay, well, I still have, other effects, basically, like the new Kamal, Fist of Krosa, or whatever his name is, Heart of Krosa, or whatever it is, that will win me the game because it'll give me +3/+3 and trample. So those are the sorts of things now that you sort of have to start looking at. And I want to go a little bit more, as I said, in depth into different commanders and different strategies and different archetypes and whatnot. most archetypes either fall into like tribal or into like, I don't know, um, specific synergies and whatnot, things like that. But for the most part, like, you can find something that will work for you. I'm sure there's always one or two things that are out there, and even if there aren't exactly things that are specifically strategic, you just need to at some point be able to win the game. And if your haymaker is going to win you the game, then it really doesn't matter if it's that synergistic with your deck, for the most part, as long as it does win you that game. Of course, you don't want to just rely on too many things that are too samey or too much like, like expropriate, like those sorts of cards that are just sort of seemingly auto runs or auto include sort of cards that just say, I win the game, cards, like Crater Hoof and Enrace Forerunners and the new Kamal, again, are becoming those sorts of cards. But when your deck is focused on, this is specifically the strategy that my deck is looking for, that's where you're at. There are a couple other cards that really do this and really help your game plan out. So I want to go through certain commanders. So guys, tell me what commanders you guys want me to discuss. Write down there in the comments below and tell me what you think. Please remember that the success of channels like this is based on viewers like you, so please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you would like to support this content. You can also get social with us on our Discord and on our Facebook. If you would like to further support the channel, you can go onto our Patreon. All links are in the description. Thank you for your support. It really means a lot. I hope you have enjoyed this video here today, and if you have, I hope you will come back for another one. See you then.